I worked for 2 years in a small community hospital, located in the Hudson Valley of New York. The hospital was originally a non-profit, run by nuns. Eventually it was taken over by a larger medical organization, and converted into a more up-to-date charity hospital, with new additions built alongside the original historic building. The village the hospital is located in has a long history, and part of that history is being known for having many haunted buildings. The hospital, although professionally, never claims to be haunted, but if you talk to the staff and ask the right questions, you will be answered with plenty of ghost stories. In the short time I worked there, I had only had a few odd and hard to explain occurrences, but nothing definitive. Maybe I just wasn't there long enough, or maybe I was lucky enough not to be caught there overnight, when most of the weird shit supposedly occurs. I will try to outline my first-hand experiences, as well as the second-hand stories I heard from the hospital staff. As I already mentioned, I no longer work there, so there really isn't any reason to hide details that might reveal my identity. I worked in the pharmacy, which meant I delivered medications to the various nursing units, located throughout the hospital. When delivering controlled substances to automated dispensing cabinets, a witness, in the form of nursing staff, is required. Those interactions with nursing staff are what eventually led to discussions about the hospital's haunted history. Short passing comments such as, how one of the now retired nurses had lost their husband on the 4th floor. By lost, I mean he was a patient, and succumbed to his illness, not that he mysteriously vanished or anything like that. Death is common in hospitals, and not everyone who gets admitted always recovers. What makes this story supernatural is the fact that even after retiring, the former nurse visits the hospital every once in a while, because she claims that she can still talk to her late husband on the 4th floor. The 4th floor is considered to be the most haunted section of the hospital. Apparently at one point it was where the most patients died. While I worked there, the 4th floor was relegated to physical therapy, and what they would call the night cabinet. It was rarely occupied by patients, other than those recovering from surgeries or when the hospital was overflowing with patients, which wasn't often. On the weekends that floor was usually empty, with most of the lights turned off to save electricity, but if the cabinet needed replenishment, that meant someone from pharmacy had to go up there. But I'll tell you more about the 4th floor in another video. For now, I want to try to keep my experiences in order, starting with the first experience I can't explain, which, coincidentally, occurred on the 1st floor. About 2 months after my training ended, and I was allowed to make rounds alone, I was delivering a controlled substance to the automated dispensing cabinet. It was dilaudid, I think, but that's not important. It was a narcotic, which meant I needed a witness to complete the delivery. This delivery was to med-surg on the 1st floor, toward the back, which meant I had to walk down the hall, past all the patient rooms. As I walked with one of the nurses just a few feet behind me, I thought I heard someone, specifically an older woman, in one of the rooms ask for help. Not thinking much of it, I just kept walking past, and as I turned the corner, the nurse at my heels asked me if I heard someone say help, to which I replied yes, and her reply was simply, "That's what I thought, but there's no one in any of these rooms." Thinking it was a joke, I just brushed it off, went about signing into the computer, scanning in the narcotic, letting the nurse put in her credentials, and loading the drug into the cabinet. The nurse signed the received document, and went back to her rounds. I finished up, logged out, and started making my way back down the hall. As I walked down, I decided to peek into the room, and sure enough it was empty. In fact, every room I passed in that rear section was empty. So, who in a clear voice that the nurse and I both heard, asked for help. It was strange, but not definitive proof of anything. Similar things like that would happen from time to time, a moan or groan of pain from another empty room, but no real proof of anything supernatural. My next experience on that floor was a bit more than just a sound. On one particular occasion, I was delivering meds to that rear area, and as I passed the rooms, something caught my eye in the room closest to the cabinet. I saw a woman, probably early 30s, laying in the bed. She was obviously a patient, but at the foot of the bed, propped up against the wall, was a chair with an older woman sitting in it, watching over the patient. It wasn't strange to see, but I made note of it as I passed. It only took a few short minutes to load the handful of meds, as the majority of meds that day was loaded at the front cabinet, where most patients were located. As I started to leave, I peeked into the room, where I saw the patient still lying on the bed, but the older woman was gone, and the chair was now by the window far opposite of where it was before. I looked further in the room, and the older woman was not there. I looked down the hall, but didn't see her, and she never walked past me either. As I rushed my way to the exit, I passed the nurse's station. I stopped and asked about the older visitor, and was told they didn't have any visitors that day. I asked each nurse I passed, and they each replied the same way, no visitors today. What made it even stranger was the fact it was the same room a few weeks prior that we had heard someone ask for help, when there was no one inside. Those were the only two hard to explain experiences I personally had on the first floor. At one point, I mentioned it to some of the nurses, and they told me of some similar instances of hearing voices, sounds or knocks within empty rooms, specifically rooms they knew patients had died in, and those rooms would have most of the strange activity. Some of the nurses claimed to have had strange feelings upon entering certain rooms, especially at night, as if they sensed an additional presence. I just want to be clear, personally I never felt any such way. I never had weird feelings like that while working there, but I never stayed there past 6 p.m. The first floor only had a few stories from staff. The second floor, which is OB, or obstetrics, strangely had no stories from the nurses, but I did hear one story from housekeeping staff. It was a very short story, so I will mention it here. I was told that on one occasion, while they were cleaning the C-section operating room after a delivery, that while alone they suddenly heard a baby crying, within the room they were cleaning. The OR on that floor is located in the far rear of the floor, away from the patient rooms, beyond a set of automated doors, and behind an additional security door that requires a passcode to enter. Both sets of doors were closed, and the room was empty. The housekeeper was cleaning up the remnants of the surgery, which basically means wiping away blood and other bodily fluids. Out of nowhere, she hears a baby crying, not in the distance, not in the next room over, but directly from the surgical bed she was cleaning, as if the baby was just delivered in front of her. After that incident, she refused to do that job alone. And to make things worse, apparently on that day, a baby was delivered stillborn. If you are still watching, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the stories. This will be part 1 of a short series. If you liked it, there is more to come. Part 2 will be stories I heard about the emergency department, the intensive care unit, and the old nun that apparently makes nightly visits. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe for more, and share it with a friend.